Hi everyone, I'm Matt from Looking to Bitcoin. And today we're going to be looking at the next Bitcoin halving event, which is now less than a year away. To do this, we'll be using a number of resources that are all freely available on lookintobitcoin.com, your number one source for Bitcoin information. And if you haven't already, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications to ensure you're receiving all of our content as soon as it's released. So right now we're just on the stock to flow model chart here on Look into Bitcoin. And if you weren't already aware what the Bitcoin halving event is, Bitcoin as an asset class has an inflationary rate currently of 6.25 Bitcoin every new block. So Bitcoin, the network, uses what's called blockchain technology, which groups transactions of the Bitcoin network into what are called blocks. These blocks are then mined by miners, which contain all of these transactions, verified by all of the miners and nodes on the network, and the transactions then go through and Bitcoin acts as this decentralized peer-to-peer currency. These blocks come through around every 10 minutes or so, and as a reward for the miners for securing the Bitcoin network and allowing these transactions to go through, they receive a Bitcoin block reward of 6.25 Bitcoin. So every 10 minutes, like we said, 6.25 Bitcoin goes to the miner that solves that current block. However, Bitcoin is not necessarily a deflationary asset. However, it is an asset in which its inflationary rate is decreasing. So every 4 years, the inflationary rate, this new Bitcoin entering every new block is mined, is cut by 50%. So as we said, right now it's 6.25, and in just over a year's time, this will decrease to about 3.125 Bitcoin per block. And we can see here just on the stock to flow model with these vertical dashed lines here that indicate every previous halving event we've had and the impact that had on the Bitcoin price. Now this stock to flow model is trying to model Bitcoin based on its scarcity and the new flow of its supply into the Bitcoin network to try and come to this fair value valuation Bitcoin price based on these fundamental factors such as the inflation rate, because we can use similar stock to flow data for other assets such as gold and other precious metal commodities to see how their incoming supply relates to the price. So according to the stock to flow model right now, Bitcoin should be fairly valued at around $55,000 or so, but we can see over the course of history, this model has actually been fairly accurate at mapping out Bitcoin's price, especially following these halving events when we have this about year-long transitionary period where Bitcoin's price catches up, usually exceeds this stock to flow model valuation before maybe retracing and dipping slightly beneath. It'll be interesting to see in the coming weeks, months, and years how price actually reacts to this. So if we just go to the miner revenue in block rewards chart here we have as well. Like we discussed before, the current block reward is 6.25 Bitcoin every new block, but this will be reducing to 3.125. And we can also see here the amount of new Bitcoin entering the space every day and how much the miners are actually earning in rewards for doing so. So we could see at the Bitcoin price peak in the most latest bull cycle we had, miners were earning around 960 to over 1,000 Bitcoin per day just in block rewards. And when Bitcoin is worth over $60,000, this is a substantial amount of capital that miners are fighting towards to try and earn this block reward. So if we just go here onto TradingView and look at the price history of Bitcoin and the halving events as they occurred and the reaction they had on price, we can see here indicated by these white vertical lines the halving dates and the Bitcoin price beneath that. So we can see usually leading up to these halving events we do have a little bit of a run up in price action, even if it's only a few weeks or so, because in anticipation a lot of people try and front run this big fundamental event, but really the big transitionary effect happens following these halving events. You can see without fail that in every single one of these occurrences in the months following, Bitcoin had a huge monumental run up in price. And it's actually usually about a year after these halving events, between a year and maybe 18 months, where Bitcoin's price actually tops out. So we can see here in November 2012, late November 2012, Bitcoin's price was around $12, and following that, almost a year later to the day, Bitcoin's price topped out at above $1,000. And again, in 2016, July, when that halving event occurred, we could see about a year and a half later, Bitcoin's price reached nearly $20,000 after the halving price of around $600. And just most recently in the 2020 halving event in May 2020, the price was around $8,500 before we reached $70,000. Again, about a year and a half later. So what I've actually done here is actually mapped out this price action we had in the year leading up to the halving event, which is about where we are now, and the year after the halving event, and see how that price action overlaid today would react in the Bitcoin price. So if we just zoom in here, we can see I've indicated with this white line where the next halving event is scheduled to take place. We can't say for certain exactly the date it's going to occur because it is not based on a fixed time period, but instead an amount of blocks has to pass. So these blocks come in at different rates, as we said, approximately every 10 minutes, but sometimes the hash rate in Bitcoin increases exponentially and these blocks come through a little bit faster. Sometimes the hash rate decreases as the mining difficulty increases and they come through a little bit slower. But we can say approximately April 5th, 2024. So as I zoom out here, we can see the 2012 halving event price action cycle overlaid here in the green. This orange is the 2016 halving event, and this red the most recent 2020 halving event. And we can see in each circumstance, if similar price action were to play out in this next cycle of Bitcoin, we'd likely see a very positive reaction in price, with prices ranging from around $180,000 to potentially nearly $1 million, which I don't think any of us would complain about. But if we just zoom in a little bit, we can see in each one of these cycles, we did have quite a bit of choppy conditions, definitely some notable drawdowns too. So we can see here, if we just overlay this from a year from when the next halving schedule is likely to take place, it'll be interesting to see how closely we follow these price action cycles. Excluding this 2016 one here, the most recent 2020 cycle and the 2012 actually did have a fairly similar price action path. Obviously, their returns were inflated a little bit earlier on, but we can see following that, they both had a little bit of a drawdown and some pullback. Obviously, the 2012 one then went fairly exponential in its price increase, but the 2016 and 2020 still had a little bit of a positive reaction. Of course, the 2020 COVID crash we had here did bring Bitcoin down fairly substantially, so that maybe had quite a bit of an impact on the price, but it's really following this where almost all cycles showed an immediate positive reaction in price, taking Bitcoin in almost no time at all to new all-time highs. So if we just quickly go back to the Bitcoin stock to flow model here and look into Bitcoin, if we were to follow this fair valuation price for Bitcoin and the stock to flow model was to hold true in the next Bitcoin halving cycle, where could this predict prices to go? Well, right now it says a fair value of around, as we said, $55,000 to $60,000. If the next cycle is to hold true like it has in all previous cycles, then we could see Bitcoin prices of exceeding $500,000. So quite an exponential rise in the Bitcoin price. Is that going to happen? We're obviously going to have to wait and see. It's impossible to tell. Looking at the previous cycles, especially as we are seeing diminishing returns, it does seem somewhat unlikely, but you have to keep in mind that in the price action overlays I showed you previously, that was just the price action of the year following the Bitcoin halving event, but in the 2016 and 2020 cycles, it was actually closer to 18 months before we got that all-time high. So if we were to follow those price actions for probably a year and a half to the tail end of 2024, maybe even the start of 2025, maybe we could see higher prices than what they predicted, around $180,000, maybe exceeding $200,000 potentially. But of course, this is all just dubious speculation. 500,000, of course, would be nice. $1 million, of course, would be nice. But realistically, any substantial gains above the previous all-time high wouldn't be anything I'd complain about. So just to summarize, in around a year's time, the inflationary rate for Bitcoin will cut by 50%, from 6.25 new Bitcoin entering the network with every block, which is about every 10 minutes or so, to just 3.125 new Bitcoin. And this inflationary shock will double the production cost for Bitcoin and reduce this new supply entering the space, which is where we look at the stock to flow model to try and get this fair model valuation for where Bitcoin could go to. Obviously, that predicting $500,000, is that a little bit too optimistic? We'll have to wait and see. But what we can say is historically, looking at the impact on price of all the previous halving events, we'll likely see a very positive reaction following the event and potentially leading up to it as well. If you like this video, then please visit lookintobitcoin.com, where you can also consider becoming a site subscriber to gain access to live chats, in-depth newsletters, indicator alerts, private trading view scripts, and more, all for a fraction of the standard industry price. And let me know what your thoughts are on the upcoming Bitcoin halving event. Do you think we'll have a very positive reaction in price leading up to this, or is it going to be something that happens maybe a couple of years from now? Let me know in the comments down below and on social media. I look forward to reading and replying to all of them. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.